Hello, I'm Victor Scargle, Culinary Director for Boisset Collection Atelier Fine Foods and Catering. What we're going to work on today is making another nice simple sauce that's multi-purpose that you can use items that you already have in your kitchen. What we're going to do is we're going to make a simple red wine reduction, and we're going to finish it with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of butter, and that's going to dictate the amount of sugar and butter that we add is going to be based on what we're drinking with it and what we're going to serve it with. So all we're going to do is we've got a pan here. Hopefully it's not too warm. Nope, perfect. Nice and low. We're going to add our wine in there, and we're going to reduce it down. We're going to reduce it down to the point where you can start to see the bubbles slow down. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Well, that's reducing down. Again, I've got my sugar here and I've got my butter here as well. What butter should you use? A good local butter is always going to be best. We use plus gras for some things, a French butter, high fat content, so you need to be more careful with that, especially with something like this. If you add a lot of fat to it, it can separate and it won't be quite as nice of a sauce. Challenge also makes a great butter as well, a little bit less fat. So those are the two butters that we work with a lot here. So while that's reducing down, let's talk about what wine to use, right? That's always the question. Well, unfortunately, some people don't finish their bottle of wine. So you might have some wine around in the kitchen, and that's the wine I suggest using. Maybe it's a little bit past the time when you want to share it with your guests, so you can use that. You don't necessarily want to use a very cheap or inexpensive wine because it's unbalanced. It's not going to be balanced to start with. When we reduce it down, all that's going to do is concentrate that unbalanced flavor that you have. And as the sauce being the main component in your dish, you especially don't want to have something that's unbalanced. We can work with it as chefs, but we don't want to have to try to manipulate something so much from its natural state to work because we used a product that wasn't great from the beginning. So yes, you should drink all the wine once you open it, but if you happen to have some left over, use that wine. Use a wine, maybe a touch of the wine that you're actually going to be serving with that dish as well, and it should work out to create a nice complement. Whenever we're creating dishes, we're thinking about not only a balance of flavor. What we mean by that is acid, sweet, tart, those kind of flavor components, the different flavors that you get in your mouth, but also we want to create a dish that's balanced as well in texture. So that's something we'll talk about in some of the other dishes that we do when we could do a complete plate. But I wanted to show you today how to just do a simple sauce that can go with a lot of different items by simply reducing the red wine, adding a touch of sugar, and finishing with some butter. It makes a beautiful presentation on the plate. So now that the wine's reduced down a little bit, and the way you tell that it's getting close is you can see when it's on the heat, you'll start to see it bubbling. It'll be larger bubbles and then going down to smaller bubbles. Once you get down to the smaller bubbles, it means that the alcohol's evaporated, it's reducing down quite a bit, and it's getting to the point where we're going to want to start adding a little bit of sugar. And again, that's going to be based on the wine that you're using. So I'm going to taste it. Just a little bit of tart. We don't want to have it too tart, otherwise it's going to affect the fish, the meat, whatever we're serving it with, or it could even just be a garnish on a risotto. So I'm just going to add a touch of sugar, swirl that around so it dissolves. That way the sauce isn't granulated or granular. It's got a nice smooth finish to it. I'm going to taste it again. Again, it's one thing I think is very much under talked about is tasting things throughout the cooking process. I've been fortunate enough to work for a lot of great chefs, and tasting throughout the cooking process is the biggest thing. Seasoning throughout the cooking process. You have no idea what something's going to taste like if you're not tasting it throughout the cooking process and seasoning and adjusting it along the way. So it's a very crucial part of anything that you're making is tasting it. That's nice. It took the little edge off of tartness to it. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look at it on a spoon, and it's just starting to what they would call nappe or coat the spoon. So I know I'm getting close here. And then sometimes I'll leave it just as it is. And you can kind of test it on a plate. I've got a plate over here where we can look at it. So this is kind of a nice consistency to have it. If I was just going to put a little bit around the plate, you can see that beautiful color. The consistency of it, it's going to run just a little bit. We don't want it too tacky or gummy or too thick. But the other thing you can do too is if you want to add a little bit of body to it, I'm going to take some of this plus gras butter, again high fat content, and I'm going to just stir it into the red wine. It's going to give it a little bit more body, a little bit of shine to it. Just stir that in, melts really nice. And it's just going to add a little bit more complexity to the sauce. And you can see it still runs a little bit on the plate. And it's a very simple, nice, elegant red wine reduction by just taking the red wine, reducing it down slowly. Don't rush this. Touch of sugar based on how tart you want it to be, and you can finish it with a little bit of butter. Thanks again for joining us. Again, Victor Scargle, Culinary Director, Atelier Fine Foods and Catering for Boisset Collection.